Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us on KUTV Prevalence, and it's now time for our discussion delving on the World Mental Health Day. Now today marks the World Mental Health Day, an annual campaign run by the World Health Organization, and it is a silent and invisible crisis, though so devastating. So what is the relevance of celebrating this day, and what are the important matters to know concerning the mental health? And that forms the basis of our discussion tonight. And joining me are Kelvin Odur, who is a public health specialist, and Dr. Theophilus Juma, who is a pharmacist and co-founder of PsychX. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for dedicating your time for this discussion. And of course, now we just get the ball rolling. Now, Kevin, probably start with you. The world is commemorating this World Mental Health Day. So tell us, why is it important? And of course, looking at the theme for 2022, which is make mental health and well-being for all a global priority, how can we participate in actualizing this goal on a societal level?
Okay, well, thank you, Mondi, for this opportunity to come back again here in studio. I think to just set the ball rolling, I want to first talk about briefly what is mental health, then talk about why it's important and why I set the tone for the theme. Mental health, according to the World Health Organization, it's described as a state of well-being in which every individual can realize their full potential, and they're also able to cope with the normal stresses of life. But it just stop there. It also goes ahead to recognize that they are able to also work productively and fruitfully, and be able also to contribute meaningfully to their communities. So the opposite of that will be now what mental ill health would mean. But I want to talk about why it's important for us to celebrate this day. I think it started back in 1992 when the World Mental Health Federation first celebrated this, but it gives the world, the global mental health advocates an opportunity to take stock of their efforts and what they have done towards addressing things like social stigma that still perpetuate mental health problems, and also for stakeholders also to also take stock of what they have done and see to it that they address the remaining barriers to access to mental health care. And going to the theme, as you've asked, also is about, coming out of COVID-19, or we're still in COVID-19 pandemic. I think it builds on that crisis, and also recognizing that right now the World Health Organization recognizes mental health as non-communicable disease, or NCD. So in the current NCD's 5x5 agenda by the World Health Organization, it recognizes that. So I think that is why the theme now was crafted to be making mental health and well-being for all a global priority.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Impressive. Now, to you, Dr. Theophilus, and we are seeing what about the theme that, of course, it's set for the year 2022, which is make mental health and well-being for all a global priority. So, meaning what this theme is insinuating is that mental health is something of global concern. So could you probably tell us about the prevalence of mental health problems with a great focus probably on Kenya?
So thank you very much for this opportunity to chime in this discussion. So we're living in a world where about 1.2 billion people out of almost 8 billion people are affected by one or more mental health conditions. And this gives us a percentage of about 10% of the world population suffering from one or more mental health conditions. So looking at Africa alone, it's about 1 in every 7 people suffering one or more mental health conditions. And if we break it down further to our Kenyan society, we saw statistics being released by the Ministry of Health that 1 in every 4 people suffers one or more mental health conditions. So this gives us a picture that in as much as the World Health Organization has been on the forefront to champion for wellness, mental health wellness for that sake, the numbers keep rising by the day. So of great concern for me is the youth. And according to the United Nations, the youth are grouped as 15 to 24 years. And the statistics that we have that are available indicate that 75% of the mental health conditions have an onset between the age of 15 to 24 years, which is a very productive age, and we consider it to be the golden age of a human being. And further, there are statistics which also indicate that 50% of the mental health conditions have an onset between the age of 0 to 14 years. So this gives us an indication that, we are in a world where we are seeing an increase in the numbers, and therefore calls us to action. And I therefore want to say the theme for this is very relevant, because we want to cut this, and we even saw a higher increase in the numbers with the onset of COVID-19, which has run for a long period of time.
All right. Now, maybe I don't know, Odora, how do you want to weigh in on this? But my question on that will be, because we're talking about the prevalence of mental health, and of course, as Dr. Juma has noted to us, is that is mentioned for us an age category, most of 75% of the youth. So in one in every 4 youth probably are suffering from these mental health conditions. And if you focus on Africa and probably Kenya, we are having, looking at the demographics, most of the population, of course, is made up of the youth, and these are the people, suffering from these mental health conditions. And of course, looking still at the African countries, the poverty index, the problem that we are facing. So the middle income countries, how best can we bridge the gap of, the gap for the relationship where we're having mental health issues and the, economy status of probably the East African countries?
I think this will take me to, because the question is around how can we bridge the gap. And first of all, I have to recognize that Kenya currently is ranking so high. According to the World Health Organization's report on the World Mental Health Status, Kenya was ranked number 5 in Africa. And it's because of the high cases of depression that have been reported. And I think even in 2020, we still really ranked so high, because of issues of suicidal behavior, so suicide ideation. So Kenya ranks so high. So I mean, the question of around how do we bridge the gap will be, first of all, let's look at the mental health task force report, which was handed over to the president, the former president Uhuru Kenyatta in 2020. That was this year when. The recommendations. I think what we need to do right now to bridge that gap is just to recommend to implement those recommendations, but also to recognize that Kenya currently we also have a huge deficit in mental health workers, and out of maybe over 4,000 institutions that we have, or the healthcare institutions, only 29 are providing these mental health services. So I think bridging that gap would mean that why don't we increase the capacity of these hospitals to provide these mental health services, and also include mental health services in the primary healthcare package? Because if primary healthcare services include things like eye services or eye care, things like maternal health, why don't we include also mental health in that? And I think that would help us. And again, also increase investment in mental health, because as it's now classified under non-communicable disease, I think the clarion call or the push right now is to ensure there's increased priority, attention, and budget for these non-communicable diseases, with a particular focus on this mental health, and also calling on each and every individual just to shun this social stigma and allow people to be able to express themselves, so that we can address these mental health issues before they first and become so huge.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Juma, Daktari, of course, it's also impressive that I got to know that your focus, your specialities on the preventive aspects of these diseases. So, how best? I don't know. I want you to just weigh in onto what Udur was saying in the preventive mechanisms. You know, people need to understand what are the forms of these mental issues, because you know, there's some people probably they might look at someone. I mean, most people probably when they talk of illness, they get to understand probably that illness is when now someone can't eat, someone can't, you know, you're facing, I don't know, you're feeling here, your body temperature is so high, you can't walk probably well, a lot of coughing. So what are the forms of these mental illnesses for us to get to understand on how best we can deal with these issues? What are the forms of these mental illnesses?
Thank you very much for that. For us to even start having that discussion of preventive approach to mental health, we need to really understand what are some of the reasons why we are having an increase in the number of mental health cases.
Absolutely.
And Odor has really tried to explain what is happening in terms of government investment, the cost of mental health, insufficient number of personnel to address that. But one important thing for me that stands out is an aspect of stigma and lack of privacy and confidentiality while accessing mental health services. So while we might put in efforts to avail resources towards that, our society still plays a significant role towards addressing mental health issues. So the first approach we need to do or to take while ensuring preventive approach is by educating our society, educating our people, sitting down with our people, making sure they understand what is mental health, what are mental health issues. Because I happen to have, conducted some research in July, and the responses I got were like, when you talk about mental health issues, people know about, they talk about madness.
Right.
And that gives you a picture of, these people don't really understand. So even if we try to tell them that we are providing mental health services, they might never know what it is, because they are sharing mental health issues with madness. And in most cases, word on the street will tell you, people also think that if you are mentally ill, then you're depressed.
Right.
While there are various forms of mental health illnesses. So we need to start at that point, education. Make our people aware that this is how mental health issues present, and when you are having this is what you're supposed to do. So currently people will use what we call workarounds. For example, going to drink alcohol, going to religious institutions, which they work, yes, but there are conditions where once they get to that stage, you need a specialist to handle that. So we need to have people to understand first, and then after that, now we can come in to provide resources and the staff that is needed.
All right, Dr. Probably just maybe what I want you to to shed more light on, because you've noted well that during probably the research you're conducting, most people understand that their layman understanding of mental illnesses is when someone is going mad or something. So as you enlighten us on this, so tell us, what are the forms, what are other forms of how these mental problems manifest themselves?
Okay. So the manifestation will differ from one illness to another. As I said, people will think about depression, but they forget there's also anxiety, there's schizophrenia, psychosis, even trauma, PTSD. Stress is also not a normal thing, so that's a mental illness. But most importantly, what you will discover, mental health issues have a common presentation in terms of cognitive function, emotional function, and social function. And in this case, we mean the way somebody thinks and does things, the way they interact with people, and the way they talk. When somebody talks to you, you just realize something is happening here. Performance also tends to, decline when somebody is suffering from one or more mental health condition. So those are the general things we might look at to, specifically pin down a particular mental health condition. But for us to, sit down and conclude that this is anxiety and not depression, or trauma and not bipolar disorder, Then we'll use what we call diagnostic statistical manual, which is a criteria which is used to diagnose and provide specific symptom presentations of mental health conditions. Yeah.
All right. Now,
but I think I wanted to the question was about the forms.
Sure.
I wanted just to chime in 30 seconds. They can also present in very simple and things. Sometimes we miss them, like the lack of concentration, or even the speech disorders. They can also present in a form of like those who are extroverts, and they just, mysteriously start withdrawing from friends or even from activities. And I think those are the things that we need to watch. And even people who binge eating, like they eat a lot now, people sometimes they don't eat or even they oversleep. So there are a lot of ways in which mental ill health can present or manifest, but the common ones, of course, have been mentioned by Dr. Juma, around depression, schizophrenia. We also have things like anxiety disorder. So that's what I wanted to add on that discussion.
All right, thank you. Now, so like any other illness, of course, when talking about mental health, we've not talked about the manifestations, and of course, it also has its own risk factors. But borrowing from what you mentioned before, that the world is still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are a lot of problems, or rather there are a lot of tough times that people are facing, the economic problems, and of course now we're having the hunger problems, which some of them could be associated with the climate change. So what are the factors that people should be on the lookout for that are likely to lead to some of these mental health problems?
Oh, okay, good. I think what we have talked about, when we talk about NCDs, we look at risk factors, of course. But for mental health, I think there are things that stem from our daily lives, normal stresses. Of course, you mentioned things like hunger, economic downtime, and people are facing difficult moments. But these are normal life stress, and I think people can be able to deal with. Remember when you talked about mental health, you said that if a person can be able to cope with normal stresses of life, then they are mentally stable. But they can, the risk factors would be things like if, for example, the youth, they look at the life others are living. For example, for men, there's this language people use, like call them the colloquial terms like man up, or people are not able to even express or talk about what they are going through. So, those are risk factors for me to mental health conditions, especially among men. For the female counterparts, it would come in other forms, like you desire to maybe live a life that someone else is living, and so you might put pressure on yourself to live such kind of a life, and if you are not able to achieve that and get whatever you want, and that would really put you at risk of mental health conditions. So I think it presents both differently for the male and the female counterpart, and it depends on what somebody is desiring and what you are able to achieve or not to achieve. I think those are going to be the risk factors for mental health condition.
All right. Now, Daktari, and of course, we'll also we want to weigh into this. So I want to borrow from your interaction with the other parts of the world. Of course, you've interacted with people from different parts of the world. So how do people perceive mental health? Because Daktari, at some point you mentioned about the social stigma that is associated with mental illness. So how are people perceiving mental health problems in Kenya, and why do we still have these forms of stigmatization in this present world? Of course, you, in terms of probably trying to alleviate this, you mentioned of education. So maybe just to focus on that, why do we still have this stigmatization? And from your interaction in other parts of the world, people from other countries, how do they perceive mental issues in Kenya?
So while we have, awareness having sunk deep in the other parts like the Europe and maybe America, Africa, we still lag behind in terms of awareness regarding mental health. And one thing that I would really indicate is that according to our cultures, we still believe in witchcraft. We know there's witchcraft, there's madness, such like stuff. An interesting finding that I found in Kenya, people associate, especially the youth, now that I was privileged to do some research with the youth, they believe maybe issues like love and relationships are responsible for mental health issues, and those are things that they see every day. An important finding that I was really able to pin down when I did a comparative research in Rwanda, people still indicate when you talk about mental health issues, they associate that with trauma. Right. And that indicates to you that some of the risk factors to mental health are stem from the environment. And when you look at the history of that country, it will tell you, they've gone through a lot of, traumatic events. Right. And that really sinks into people's minds that, mental health issues are trauma. While people in Kenya will believe mental health is madness, witchcraft, pretense or something like that. Other parts of the world have different perspectives. And in Africa, mainly the common belief is witchcraft, So these cultural and social beliefs that exist in the African context, I think they still stand on the way towards us making the necessary steps to alleviate mental health issues. Yeah.
Right. Oh, now, probably, Odur, I don't know what you think about this, because let us probably use the data that Dr. gave us, that, the prevalence of mental health problems is majorly with the youth and the young people. So looking at the trends, because we need to safeguard the future. The youths are generally the future of any nation. And of course, looking at the demographics as well, in Africa, the most population is made up of the youth. So want us to tell us, who are the most susceptible categories for these mental health issues, and what are rather for this age category, for these people who are more susceptible to these mental health problems, how best can they be assisted?
Yeah, I think if you ask about the group that is mostly susceptible or vulnerable to mental health condition, I would categorize them under maybe let me say male and female. I think the male population is now more prevalent or vulnerable to mental health condition owing to the fact that they do not express themselves when faced with difficult situations, and because the society also is so much on the male population not to express themselves when they're facing or they're experiencing something. And for the female counterpart, you find that they're more expressive, and so when something happens, they will talk about it, and talking about it now start the process of healing.
Right.
And so there I would say the male counterpart is more susceptible to mental health conditions or mental health issues. In terms of age group, I think Dr. Juma talked about the age between 15 to 24, which is maybe probably the youth. They're more susceptible owing to the fact that they're also facing a lot of issues. They're starting to experience life, and they have not known how to deal with them. And for example, during the COVID-19, I did a research on the same and realized that the young people, for me it was 18 and 35, probably vulnerable because of the fact that they faced social and what do we call mobility restriction during this time, because they are the people who want to interact more. So being closed or the curfew meant that they could not interact.
Right.
And that makes them a population that is more vulnerable. But again, with issues like relationships, I mean, they are still also want to maybe education, and there are a lot that is crumbling down on them, so they're the most susceptible. So in terms of age, it is the young people, and in terms of looking at gender, I think it is the male counterpart that is really bearing the brunt of this year.
All right. Now, probably maybe as we wind up, Dr. I would interest you maybe just to tell us, because Audora noted very well that there were recommendations that were made and were given to the president on how we could deal with these mental health issues. But we understand it's not only a responsibility of the government; it's also it's a collective responsibility that the society as well also needs to give its own input. So, what advice concerning mental health would you want to pass to the rest of the population, the society that, of course, are engaging with people who have these mental health problems?
Okay. So, if we have what we call private-public partnership, I believe that is the future, where people take it upon themselves as their responsibility to, educate our own society. And for that case, I'm speaking on the youth, to the youth of this country, that we need to wake up and stand up and defend what is ours. So we need to see more youth coming out to do innovation around mental health, leveraging on technology, because the age group is technology savvy and they spend most of their time on social media, So we need to innovate around that, come up with solutions which are youth-friendly, which are Africanized, and I believe that will increase the uptake of, mental health approaches and reducing the prevalence.
All right. Yeah. As we wind up, Udor, what's your final take on this?
I thought Dr. Juma will talk about PsychX now that because they're providing. He co-founded this.
Yeah, but he's told us. People need to leverage on technology. Probably, I don't know. Maybe you forgot on that, Doctor. You can still go ahead.
I think you should talk about that.
Yes. So I've been very passionate about mental health. And this stems from, my work, practice in the field. And so towards that, I got an opportunity to, innovate around it under the incubation program by what we call Jasiri for Africa, supported by Alan and Jill Gray Foundation. And through that, we went through a program, a residential intensive program for 3 months. And coming out of that, we, did problem validation. We came up with a simple solution which is suitable for the youth, and we call ourselves PsychX. So if somebody needs mental health services and wellness, you can just check us out, log in onto our platform. It's www.psychx.io. So we try to provide, a more user-friendly platform where the youth can get, mental health services. And for us at PsychX, we believe mental wellness is your wealth. So if we're able to cater for people's wellness psychologically, then we are building a wealth which is not just for now, but for the future. Yeah.
All right. Maybe, you told us, the technology space, most people are on social media. So maybe can they access this help probably from social media as well?
Yes, so you can get us on Instagram, PsychX Global, on Facebook, PsychX Global, and on Twitter, PsychX Global as well.
All right.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So you just have a minute or so, Dr. Well, not Dr. but anyway, you're still a doctor.
Let me just go ahead now to my clarion call on during this mental health day celebration. I think the theme for this year was intentionally crafted to, invite everybody to join in the call to making mental health a global priority. And it doesn't mean that the UN or the political declaration at the United Nations General Assembly would suffice. It requires all of us to join in that.
Sure.
And it's a collective responsibility, meaning that you and I have a role to play. So I just want to invite each and every person to, recognize their integral role in addressing these mental health conditions, and also in addressing the social stigma, which has been cited to be a barrier towards access to mental health care services. So let's recognize our role and play that role, and by that we'll be living up to the theme of making mental health care and well-being a global priority.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, and that's it for the Mental Health Day commemoration, and just get it from the health specialists and Dr. The clarion call, of course, is that it is our collective responsibility if we are to deal with this menace. So let everyone